Under the sterile white glow of the Galactic Council's high chamber, 17 species sat in tense semicircle, each encased in biocontainment fields tailored to their physiology. Silence stretched like wire, taut and waiting to snap. The chamber was massive, ringed with layered tiers of crystalline data scrolls and relics from extinct civilizations. And yet, despite the grandeur, urgency fouled the air like a silent alarm. Counselor Virex of the Tharn delegation finally broke the silence, his voice a brittle whisper amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "We have exhausted all avenues. The Kauthari are weeks from overtaking the Corward Reach. Every predictive simulation ends in collapse." Hushed murmurs stirred. Tentacled emissaries twitched, crystalline antennae blinked with concern. The Kauthari, hive-mind, resource-obsessed, immune to negotiation, had steamrolled 12 systems in 6 months. The Council had sanctioned military deterrence, economic blackouts, even viral data plagues. None slowed the swarm. From the central dais, Arch-Councilor Thesel leaned forward, iridescent feathers flicking with agitation. "Then propose a solution that does not require genocide." Virex paused, his ocular membrane flickering uncertainty. "I wish to motion for the summoning of a human." An audible shiver rippled through the chamber. An Olderai ambassador expelled a pulse of bioluminescent disdain. The Centauri representative coiled tighter into its nutrient gel, emitting 3 ultrasonic clicks of ridicule. "A human?" growled the Gravox war broker. "You suggest we bring in a species whose greatest cultural export is chaos memes? They've barely mastered interstellar etiquette." Virex remained composed. "They may be primitive by council metrics, but they are disruptive, flexible, creatively unbound. That's a euphemism for reckless," snapped the Ascalari legalist. "Their species held over 200 separate nations within a single biosphere, and still developed FTL. That's madness. And genius," Virex countered. "No species in this chamber has accomplished as much with as little cohesion. They have solved impossible energy equations using supercooled wires and failed ideologies. They fought wars through wires and won peace through shared sound waves. They nuked their own sky. Twice," someone muttered. "They walked on their own moon with less computation than a chamber door," Virex said quietly. "We don't need compliance. We need disruption." The chamber swirled with discordant signals, ultrasound, photonic flares, pheromone mists. Debate raged across protocols and species. Finally, Councillor Thesel raised a single claw, and the noise collapsed. "We are the preservers of order, not gamblers," Thesel said coldly. "And order is failing," Virex replied. "Summon the human. Let them see our dilemma. One individual. No armies, no influence. Just a question, what would they do?" Councillor Ashmek of the Vril Collective pulsed a low tone. "And if they speak nonsense? Then we thank them for their time, and proceed to extinction," Virex said simply. Minutes passed. No voices rose. Only blinking data scrolls registered the roll call vote. Each name called, each signal cast. Most votes were abstentions, cowardice by bureaucracy. 8 votes in favor. 7 against. 2 neutral. The motion passed. "By rule of Emergent Crisis Protocol, the summoning is approved," the chamber AI announced tonelessly. A cylindrical transmission capsule rose from the central pedestal. Inside, encoded in every known language, was a single request: representative of Earth, summoned to the Galactic Council under Clause 9.7 of First Contact Variants. For the first time in 12,000 rotation cycles, Earth would receive an invitation not as a subject of study, not as a cultural curiosity, but as a peer asked to intervene. The moment the signal launched, an uncanny stillness gripped the chamber. There was no cheer. No celebration. Only the quiet understanding that everything, every protocol, every tradition, every assumption, was now subject to change. Somewhere in the back tier, a silent courier drone began preparations for a guest unlike any the galaxy had seen, a species without caste or consensus, without perfection or precedent. But a species that, when faced with extinction, didn't consolidate, they evolved. And the council had just invited that anomaly into its heart. The chamber lights dimmed as the human entered, alone, unarmed, unaccompanied. No delegation, no translation aid, no ceremonial attire. Just a dark blue utility jacket, worn boots, and an easy stride that paid no mind to the gravity differential. The council expected ceremony. They got a nod and a backpack. 17 sets of alien optics studied the figure. Height, average. Gait, relaxed. Heart rate, according to the bioscan, elevated but steady. No signs of neural tampering, no external tech beyond a compact data pad and what appeared to be a thermos. The human didn't bow. Didn't scan the counselors. Instead, they approached the empty podium, unscrewed the thermos, and took a sip. So, this the part where you explain why you called me, or should I just wing it? Silence, thick and stunned. Counselor Thezzel's voice cut through, sharp and metallic. Do you comprehend the gravity of this assembly? I was briefed, the human said, unbothered. Galactic Council. Existential threat. Desperate for new ideas. You picked Earth. That about it. Whispers slithered through the delegates. Some mistook it for insolence. Others, curiosity. But the humans spoke without submission, without fear, yet not with arrogance. They simply occupied space like they were born to do so. Counselor Virex leaned forward. We summoned you because your civilization thrives on instability. You are not here to lecture. You are here to observe and offer perspective. The humans scratched their chin. Perspective, right? All right, here's one. Your structure's the problem. A click, a gasp, an ultraviolet flare of offense. The Greyvox emitted a hissing rumble. Explain that statement, or rescind it. Sure. You've got 17 species trying to run a galaxy like it's a cathedral. Everything in here's engineered for harmony, symmetry, consensus. But you're facing something that doesn't care about any of that. The Cathari don't negotiate. They consume. And you're trying to outvote them. You suggest anarchy? I suggest agility. Decentralization. You're built like a monument. They're a wildfire. Counselor Ashmek's voice was low and precise. And what does your species offer? Fire? No, the human replied. Matchsticks. And hands that never stop moving. A flick of the wrist opened a holographic interface. The human brought up data, snapshots of Earth's history, decentralized resistance networks, peer-to-peer tech breakthroughs, rogue scientists changing global policy. All edge cases. All human. This is what we do when the systems fail, the human said. We get weird. We go local. We break patterns until one fits. Several counselors shifted. The idea of deliberate disorder was repugnant to some, intriguing to others. You challenge our structure with no replacement, Thezzel said. I'm not replacing anything. I'm reminding you that entropy doesn't wait for consensus. If you want to survive the Cathari, stop playing symphony. Start thinking jazz. They sipped again. Steam rose from the thermos, rich with unfamiliar aroma. Not once did they consult notes. You're not trained in diplomacy, muttered the Ascalari. You speak like a civilian. I am a civilian, the human said. Your message said representative of Earth. Didn't say from where. So you got me. Are you authorized to act on behalf of your planet? Ashmek inquired. Nope. But I am authorized to speak. That's kind of our thing. Another silence followed, but this one held less tension, more weight. The chamber had heard hundreds of voices speak with caution, calculation, fear. This one spoke with clarity. And it left no room for pretension. You'll be granted time to present a formal proposal at the next cycle, Thezzel said, voice cooled. Cool, the human said, sealing the thermos. I'll bring visuals. They turned to leave. No salute. No closing statement. Just the same stride, same quiet confidence. Behind them, 17 minds recalibrated, not because of what had been said, but because of what hadn't. For the first time in cycles, the chamber felt less like a sanctuary, and more like a place where something might actually happen. The human returned on time, carrying no devices but their voice. The council chamber dimmed as expected. All eyes and sensors focused forward. No pageantry, no delay. Once, the human began, there was an elephant afraid of ants. Not because the ants were stronger or smarter, but because they could go where the elephant never could. They could surround it, change it, collapse its legs from underneath, silently. No context provided. No immediate explanation. Just stillness. You're the elephant, the human continued. You built systems so tall they can't bend. You think danger comes from size. It doesn't. It comes from angle. Data projected midair. No jargon. Just imagery, ships outflanked by smaller vessels, strategies unraveled by misdirection, dominant species undone by overlooked threats. Every slide was simple. Every concept direct. You're trying to beat the Kothari with scale, precision, hierarchy. They don't operate on those rules. Neither do we. A map of Earth blinked on. Not its borders, its chaos. Wild timelines. Revolutions. Hacks. Cultural leaps. Startups born from garages. Peace talks initiated by musicians. Discoveries made by accident. Scars that became catalysts. We win by being wrong and adapting faster. We break things to find new shapes. When something doesn't work, we don't optimize. We reinvent. A pause. Eyes tracking every word. You don't understand us. That's fine. We don't always understand ourselves. But you called us here because you're out of options, not out of intellect. And that's important. Because you're close. You're just missing the core variable. A pulsing sphere emerged, data form of a neural net. Not artificial. Biological. Human. It pulsed with unpredictability. Emotion, the human said. You optimize for efficiency. We optimize for meaning. You fight to win. We fight because we care. And that makes us irrational. Which makes us dangerous to predict. Slides faded. Lights rose slightly. The human looked directly into the chamber's shared lens. You want to stop the Kothari? You need a structure they can't map. One that shifts faster than they can adapt. That means abandoning universal doctrine. No more central approval. Let border systems lead. Let artists propose war strategy. Let soldiers write peace terms. Let everyone be part of the answer. Whispers spread, some in agreement, others alarmed. A few stared unmoving. This council was built for preservation, the human said. But preservation without change is embalming. You've got to stop preserving and start evolving. A final file opened, 3 proposals. First, rotating leadership per crisis zone. No fixed seats. Second, shared codebase for decision protocols, editable by all member species with local override rights. Third, empathy quotient added to all strategic models. Not because it's nice. Because it works. You expected tactics, the human said. You got transformation. They stepped back. No flourish. No request for approval. Just a breath. Humans aren't better, they said. We're just impossible to script. And that's what you need. No applause followed. The chamber didn't do applause. But no one moved. No one signaled dismissal. One counselor, silent until now, activated their relay. You believe unpredictability is an asset, they said. I believe it's the only one you haven't tried yet. Another asked. And if we fail trying it your way? Then at least you failed trying something new. Silence returned, this time not from confusion, but calculation. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council wasn't just absorbing a message. It was considering rewriting itself from the inside out. Adoption of the proposals didn't begin with a vote. It began with fracture. Smaller systems along the Corward frontier stopped waiting. The Council had not formally endorsed decentralization, but the message had rippled out. Entire regions activated dormant local protocols. Outposts traditionally reliant on central supply chains began networking directly with one another, skipping layers of bureaucratic oversight. Pirate clans were recruited as scouts. Disenfranchised species offered unfiltered intel in exchange for relevance. At first, chaos bloomed. Command structures clashed. Reports contradicted. Doctrines dissolved under pressure. But beneath the noise, something emerged: movement. Not uniform. Not smooth. But alive. The Kauthari, long reliant on anticipating rigid responses, began encountering unpredictability. Probes intercepted misinformation. Infiltration nodes met civilian-led cyber interference, disorganized but persistent. Fleet deployments shifted erratically, backed not by central strategy, but by emergent pattern recognition shared between disconnected actors. The swarm faltered, not fatally, but noticeably. Inside the council, unease mounted. Traditionalists warned of collapse. "We are ceding control to instinct," one ambassador argued. "Without cohesion, there is no civilization." The human was summoned again. This time, not to propose, but to clarify. "What you're seeing isn't collapse," they said. "It's shedding. The old skin is coming off. But you lack oversight." A delegate protested. "We never had it," the human replied. "We had momentum. You're mistaking stillness for safety." Questions followed, sharper now. What about command integrity? How do you coordinate strategy across thousands of voices? "You don't," the human said. "You let them coordinate themselves." Confusion. Outrage. And yet, in the field, evidence grew. One mining colony repurposed asteroid haulers into mobile defense platforms. Not elegant, not legal, but effective. Another system formed a linguistics bridge using AI built by rogue archivists and rejected council funding. It unified 5 frontier languages in 3 days. Entire regions began bypassing the central bureaucracy altogether, solving problems not with permission but with action. The council's own analysts could not dismiss the data. Where traditional force failed, unconventional behavior gained ground. Skirmishes ended faster. The swarm adjusted slower. Victory remained distant, but momentum was changing direction. The Kauthari, bred for consumption, had no framework for adaptability not preordained. Every human-touched strategy operated outside prediction models. What was once a linear war had become asymmetrical. Less a battle, more a conversation, and one the enemy couldn't follow. Still, resentment brewed within the chamber. Councillor Thesel issued a final challenge. "You risk the integrity of the galaxy on the belief that chaos can outpace coordination." "What if you're wrong?" the human answered calmly. "Then you still break even. Because your structure already failed. This isn't gambling. It's surviving by learning. And if we win? Then you'll never go back to how things were. And that's the point." Delegates fell quiet. No speeches, no counterarguments. Just calculation. In their cores, even the most rigid species recognized the truth: survival without change was already off the table. The only question left was how to steer through the storm without a rudder, and whether that was a flaw or the feature they'd always needed. Change had begun. And not because it was agreed upon, but because someone acted before approval was possible. Not an order. A pattern. Not a system. A spark. The Council, by its own inertia, had become the center of something new, something it did not control. And for the first time in galactic memory, that loss of control wasn't a threat. It was a door. The war didn't end with a decisive battle. It ended when the Kauthari stopped advancing, not from defeat, but from confusion. Patterns they relied on no longer existed. Routes they once exploited were rerouted daily. Protocols fractured into localized responses. The galaxy had become unreadable. The swarm's momentum collapsed under the weight of unpredictability. For a species designed to consume order, the loss of symmetry was unsustainable. Attacks grew erratic. Incursions stalled. Some fronts dissolved without confrontation. The Kauthari withdrew, not by force, but by disorientation. The galaxy had out-evolved them. There was no parade. No treaties. Just silence. And slowly, cautiously, species once in retreat began to breathe again. In the council chamber, seats once rigid in protocol now showed variation. Delegates spoke less through layers and more directly. Smaller systems held rotating representatives. Ideas flowed not by status, but by resonance. And in the center of it all, the human was no longer a novelty, just another voice, respected for what it had sparked. Councillor Thesel addressed the chamber, eyes steady. What we feared has passed. What we became in response remains. There was no move to reinstate the old structure. No appetite for regression. The chamber had changed because the galaxy had, and no one desired the slow death of preservation anymore. The humans stood again, this time not to instruct, but to reflect. You didn't win because of us, they said. You won because you let go. Of certainty. Of hierarchy. Of perfection. They paused, letting the weight settle. We weren't your solution. We were your reminder. That life adapts or it ends. There was no objection. Delegates who once dismissed Earth now leaned forward when it spoke. Not because they agreed with everything, but because it had made them think. And that, above all, had been missing. The human offered one final proposal, not structural, but cultural. A permanent council seat reserved for a rotating outsider. Not bound by status or rank. Chosen from outside the system. Someone with no allegiance but perspective. It was controversial. But it passed. Not unanimously. But decisively. Galactic history now recorded the war not as a conflict of strength, but as a shift in thinking. The Kautheri were not defeated by weapons, but by a mindset they couldn't replicate. The species that survived weren't the strongest, or even the wisest. They were the ones willing to rethink everything. The Council archives added a new classification, HFY. Not doctrine. Not ideology. Just an acknowledgement. That sometimes, the most valuable force in the galaxy isn't order. It's humanity. Not as a species. But as a function, the ability to question structure, to rewire expectation, to adapt with intent. Delegates came and went. Systems rebuilt. But the stories remained. Of how one voice, born from a chaotic planet and untrained in diplomacy, changed the most ordered body in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through perspective. The human returned to Earth eventually, declining permanence. I did what I came to do, they said. Now you carry it forward. And they did. Not always cleanly. Not without conflict. But with motion. Because the galaxy had learned that survival didn't mean staying the same. It meant daring to become something new, again and again. Not because it was easy. But because it was necessary. And in the shadows of dead systems and rewritten stars, something quiet held steady, not legacy, not command, but the ripple of a single idea, proven true in the most unexpected way. Humanity wasn't chosen because it was better. It was chosen because it had never stopped changing.